I always would say, do you remember why you started playing? Remember back when you were on the playground, you started playing. Bring that into this match.
Mhm.
Enjoy it because you're going to play better if you're happy and smiling. And then after you succeed, let's go do something fun.
Welcome to our Sport Fuels Life podcast, where we're bringing you interviews with coaches and athletes at the top of their game.
This is a community to support coaches, athletes, and fans who share a passion for making the world a better place through athletics.
We're your hosts. I'm Megan.
And I'm Scott. Welcome
Welcome
to
to
Sport
Sport
Fuels
Fuels Life.
Life.
All right. Well, on today's Sport Fuels Life podcast, we have with us Craig Boynton. Thank you so much for joining us again. He's been on the podcast before, and he's so awesome that we had to bring him back. So thank you so
My
much for
my
joining me.
pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. Well, awesome. And so you have an incredible background and experience with coaching the top, not to mention number one tennis players in the world, including Jim Courier. So quite the resume with coaching and with your experience of dealing with a lot of athletes. Let's dive in just to the coaching side of things first.
Mhm.
I guess could you tell us a little bit, do you have a coaching philosophy or like has that changed throughout the years and your experience with just navigating different athletes and challenges?
It's definitely evolved. I uh, I always felt when I got help when I was playing, I really connected with people that very much cared about me and would give me advice based upon their good-hearted nature, and they really wanted to see me succeed. So I always tried to take an individual approach. I'm kind of an empathetic coach, if you will. I'm a relationship-based coach. And so that has served me well. And as I have gotten more experienced and coached more players, um, that is kind of the niche or what kind of worked for me. I never really liked or gravitated towards the hard line coaches do this because I always felt that it's a collaboration, and I evolved to two rules of coaching for me. The first rule of coaching is it's not about me; it's about the player. And the second rule is if you get confused, revert back to rule number one. And so that is always that kind of is my umbrella, which I've always tried to do everything underneath that umbrella, action wise, to represent that kind of mission statement, if you will. And I feel it's worked well for me. I feel that I've been blessed because the players that I've worked with, I think that it's been about 3 or 4 years has been the shortest uh, playing or professional relationship I've had. So it's just worked well for me, and it's something that I would recommend as players and we evolve. Um, the athletes are different, and you see it in other sports. It's more of a kind of the relationship based approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I almost want to call it old school, the other version where you're a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more this is my way or the highway. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like I'm seeing more of a trend of coaching kind of gravitating to that style of things. And I think having that empathy and that collaboration, maybe some coaches have trouble letting go of their ego and they want to be the one to like tell the athletes what to do. But it seems like you have a better time building that trust with an athlete, and that can really enhance the coach athlete relationship and ultimately lead to the player success. So, on that note, with kind of like having that connection with an athlete and maybe being able to read them a little bit differently. How do you identify different strengths in an athlete or weaknesses, and how do you work to develop them to their best potential, kind of based on their individuality?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been fortunate enough to have known a couple of the players that I was successful with prior to coaching them. So with that, I knew a lot about them. I knew a lot about their game. I knew a lot about their personality. So it takes time if you don't know someone and or if you don't know them well. For me, it takes a little bit more time of asking questions. Um, it's funny the first time I met Hubie and got on the court with Hubie uh, was at Indian Wells, was at a tournament, and so I was really cautious not to say too much or going down a different area. I asked him a ton of questions to get to know him. And it took me a number of months to really kind of get to know him, who he was, how he saw the game. Then there was John Isner, who I knew for about a year and a half before stepping into the role of being his coach. And I hit the ground running with John because we knew each other for over a year and a half. I watched him practice, I watched him play. So it takes a bit of time to get to know them and then get to know their game. And the tennis piece of it is okay, if you want to be successful on the tour, you want to be top 50, it's kind of a what do you do freakishly? You've got to do something better than the other players in the world to get to that neighborhood. And so then it's identifying what their physical skills are, called the hardware, and then watching them compete and seeing how they compete, which is the software, which is the thoughts, and which is kind of the mental side of it. And I've always said the matches will dictate what needs work. And so then if it's mental, if it's emotional, if it's physical, then the building starts. And that's the fun part is that, building towards their certain goals, whatever they want to achieve.
Yeah, and so you mentioned really three key things there is having some sort of freak factor to really separate themselves and getting to that next level, not even just next level, but the top of the top. And I love that hardware software analogy. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're dealing with high level athletes, do you find that there's really much difference physically, or does most of it come down to mentally? And if so, which can be more difficult to coach?
Wow. um, you have some players that are just physically ridiculous. The Sinner and Alcaraz. These guys, like, I don't know what happened. They stepped on something great. They can just do things to the ball that most can't. So physically, they are just super gifted. But that doesn't mean that they don't win every match. So that doesn't mean that who you're working with isn't gifted in their own right. So it's getting to work, finding and getting to those tools, and then how they go about their business. So it depends upon each individual as to there's not one answer that's easier or more difficult than the other. It depends upon how much the athlete identifies the same issues as I do as their coach. If we're all on the same page, if we all just kind of are in the tent and in the safe space, and we put it all on the table, and I say, "Hey, I see X, Y, and Z," and the player's like, "You're spot on." Okay, great. We've got a great starting point of okay, we know where we are, we know where we want to be. Now let's construct a plan to get there. And that's where we're all on the same page. It's a tight circle, it's a tight team, and there are no secrets, there are no egos. We're all on board to get the player to where they want to be. It's where it's if you're not on the same page, and that's where things can take a little bit more time, because you got to all be in unison, going in the same direction. It's like the lanes on a highway, and there's multiple lanes on a highway, and you've got a team that's team members that are in charge of each lane, and they all need to be working together. They all need to be in their lane and to give the best to the player to ultimately get to the top.
Yeah, and a lot of other things kind of popped up there. So in it almost makes for easier coaching when you guys can both be aligned. And I like that you mentioned competition. I think that really accelerates learning because sometimes it feels like, because I'll do some coaching for track and field, and when you're working through more of the mental side, sometimes you have the same conversations with an athlete over and over and over again, and then they either eventually change or make that adjustment they need to get to the next level because they realize
Hmm.
I need to listen to the coach. But other times they can just be a little bit more stubborn and it just takes a while. But I think having that competition experience can kind of help them put together what you're saying as a coach a little bit more. So I guess with that being said, could you
And
talk?
if I may dovetail
Yeah,
on that,
yeah,
is
please do.
that you brought up a great point there. And so then if you're going over material and the same thing happens over and over again, then it's like, okay, do you feel or see what I see as your coach? And if there's a disconnect, no, I really thought I did something better. Well, then you bring in data. And this is where things have changed now. You've got cameras everywhere, and you can break things down with data
Mhm.
and say it's whatever the issue is. I don't know what the issue would be, or you're not running fast enough, or you're not getting enough push. Well, you can track that. You actually have technology now, you can track that. And so it's not me saying it, it's the data saying, well, I know what you think you're feeling, and feelings can lie, but here's the data. So let's go back to the point, and we can get data in real time. And then that's when you kind of can have a breakthrough, like, oh, okay, I get it now. Or you got to come from a different point. But it's great that you mentioned that, because for all the coaches out there with the day and age and whatnot, let the information, let that work for you. So it's not he said, she said, or she said, he said, or whatnot, or I'm saying X, but you're feeling Y. And you can get through material a lot quicker too if you just have impartial data and you just lay it out and go, here you go.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up the technology piece because, yeah, the numbers don't lie. You can't argue with that feedback. And
Well,
then,
you can, but you just won't win.
right,
You
you're
can,
just
right,
being
right,
stubborn. But
correct, correct.
it almost seems like that technology piece will really help with the physical changes that an athlete needs to make, whether it's technique or whether it's strength or speed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, so do you see that maybe as an athlete enhances their physical abilities, that their mental abilities are also getting better? They're able to handle more pressure. They're doing better in their matches. Or do you sometimes see that maybe there's a discrepancy? Like maybe they progress physically, but they need to catch up mentally, or vice versa.
Well, there's always going to be some sort of imbalance, usually. I mean, Yannick Sinner is firing on all cylinders right now, but we don't know what he's saying to his coaches after the match. Looks easy on the court,
Mhm.
but the easy part might be what's easy for him, but he might be like, oh my gosh, this was so hard. You don't know. It's never really always in balance. I mean, it's rare where everything, if you equate it like an athlete, you go to play golf. I'm hitting the drive amazing. My irons, I'm just killing the flag. I'm putting
Mhm.
amazing. So out of the trap, not a problem. So, I don't know how many golfers are firing on all cylinders on all points. And you take that to the athletes. Generally, where you start, if they're really good or if they're great, they do things in some of the lanes that are just high level. And that's, I always say, your assets are going to determine how big your house is. Your liabilities are going to determine how many houses and the zip codes that they're in. And so you kind of get to work. Not everyone is perfect. We're all human. We're cut from the same cloth. We all have something that needs to get better about us, and that's just identifying that and getting to work, coming to a plan and getting to work.
Yeah. And I'm sure usually at your level of coaching that you're dealing with athletes who are understanding what you're saying and they are willing to work with you. But have you ever had an athlete that might be a little bit stubborn in one way or another, and maybe you guys aren't seeing quite eye to eye, or maybe there's just a little bit of resistance there, and so it just leads to a longer path of them reaching their goals, and it's just a little bit frustrating for both of you guys?
Sure, it's happened before. I mean, and that's where I feel like I'm pretty patient. And the timing of those conversations are important. And so if I'm seeing something, if I'm seeing a situation that's arising and it's kind of arising, um, then it's having an honest conversation. And I can have an honest conversation because of the relationship that we have, because of how I approach coaching player relationship. So it kind of goes full circle. And if it gets to the point where we disagree, whatnot, I'll just say, "We'll try it." You know, it doesn't matter who's right. What's important is we get it right. And it doesn't. You want to be on a team where it's amazing what can get accomplished if nobody cares who gets the credit.
Yeah.
And if it's something that keeps reoccurring, and you get to an impasse, well, then maybe you just need a different voice, because it's pretty clear to me that this is the issue. But if it's not clear to you that that's the issue, listen, you're the player. I will yield to you almost 99 times out of 100, because you're the one that's got to go on the court. You're the one that's got to
Mhm.
perform. You're the one that has got to absorb all the pressure. You're the one that's got everything flying at you. I get it. I know how hard this is. It's so hard what these athletes to make a living playing sports, and especially now this day and age with everything flying at you. So I will relent to the athlete many, many, many times. But if it gets to the point where it's painfully obvious, well, then we're kind of at an impasse. And so then we have to have a conversation, because we're
Yeah.
not on the same page.
Yeah, and that's kind of where that trust in the relationship comes in, because as a coach, you also need to hold that athlete accountable. Otherwise, they're not going to make as much progress. But as important as it is for you to hold them accountable, it's even more important for them to hold themselves accountable. So you have to almost convince them of that and show them with the data of what they need to see, and
Hmm.
then you guys can be on the same page. But
Correct.
and so I guess talking about making money in tennis or the opportunities it can provide, it can definitely be a sport that some people make a great living out of, and it can lead to a lot of people having big dreams of maybe getting a college scholarship or playing pros. So if you're looking at maybe an athlete out there from their perspective, someone who wants to get better, someone who wants to go to the next level, whether they're in high school looking to play in college, or if they're looking to play as a professional,
Hmm.
what does that look like, making that leap to the next level? And what advice would you give them?
Well, whenever I go and watch someone play and do an assessment, it doesn't matter what level. I look at it like this: there's an asset bucket and there's a liability bucket. And so the asset bucket is when you go play a set, if there's no deuce scoring along, you got to win a minimum of 24 points. And so when I look at it, it's like kind of chess. In what situation or what scenario would be best for that player to hit this shot to win that point? Whether it's going to be a serve or a forehand or a backhand or volleys, what are the assets in that bucket? And then I look and say, okay, well, what are the liabilities? If I'm coaching against that player, what situation would I put them in to put my player or coach my player to the best position to get their assets up against this player's liability? And then I would get to work, but I get to work. I'd start asking questions. It would really depend upon how much I know them, how much they know me, but I would ask a ton of questions and try to get as much information I could about how they process information, how they see the court, what are their goals, what are situations that they gravitate towards? What are situations that they gravitate against? And try to put that all in kind of a pot, if you will, and come up with a plan. And then it's okay, well, how big do you want your goal to be? You want to go to the next level, which could be high school tennis. Okay, well, all you would need to do is these three things to get your goal, which is great, which is fine. If that's your goal, if you want to go to college, okay, well, that list would be a little bit more extensive. If you
Hmm.
want to play pro, okay, well, that list keeps growing and growing and growing. Because again, when you're at the pro level in anything that you're doing, you're with sharks. And you know they want to eat you before you eat them. So especially in tennis, because it's all you're hunters, you only get paid if you win. And kind of like golf, those individual sports, and so it becomes a little bit more intense, a little bit more extreme. But that's kind of my process of how I do things with players, regardless of the level they want to get to.
Yeah, and it's interesting with goal setting. It's almost more fun the lower level you are as you keep getting better and better. It takes a lot longer to hit those goals because they are so big. And
Hmm.
you are just looking for margins to hit that goal and just get closer, just the tiniest bit closer. And it's almost easier to make progress when you have less experience. Um, so in a way, it's almost more fun the more fresh you are, and it does
Right.
get more intense as you get
Hmm.
the higher levels.
The
So
better you get, the better you have to become. That's the way it is. I mean, I when I worked at a club a million years ago, I loved beginners. Like I would take, yes, I ran high end juniors, but they all looked at me like I was crazy because I'm like, I'll take the beginner class. I loved beginners because they're a blank sheet and they're so excited to learn. And if you figure out what's the best course for them, they get they get better quicker,
Mhm.
very quickly, and they're so appreciative. So I loved playing. I loved working with the beginners.
Yeah,
That was a lot of fun.
yeah, it's definitely a change of pace. I guess I mean, there's almost so much. Is there a way that you can tap into that naive joy that comes with being a beginner as you get to be a little bit more seasoned in your game? Are there ways that you can maybe set little goals or little milestones along the way to kind of celebrate and still keep the joy in the sport rather than be so focused on, of course, you need to stay focused, but I guess is there a little trick perhaps to enjoy the joy?
Sure, you hit the nail on the head. Little celebrations, and I'll tell you a story. This was during COVID. And Hubie and I, we were playing in Rome, and this was before Hubie kind of had a breakout. He was probably top 30, and he was playing Rublev, third round, I think, and in our hotel was a real high end wine shop, and I brought Hubie down to the wine shop, and there was this really kind of expensive bottle of wine that I wanted to have. I said, Hubie, one. I went in and I bought the bottle, and I'm like, Hubie, I'm going to celebrate your small victories here. I mean, that's a pretty big victory, but you've got to keep the joy. We do this for fun, and you have to keep the joy involved in it. And you've got to, if you have success, celebrate it. A
Mhm.
lot of the times what can happen is you get to this high level and you feel like you have to win because everybody's after you and you're going to be letting so many people down if you don't. But I always would say, do you remember why you started playing? Remember back when you were on the playground, you started playing. Bring that into this match.
Mhm.
Enjoy it because you're going to play better if you're happy and smiling. And then after you succeed, let's go do something fun. Let's I don't know, buy a big bottle. Well, Hubie's not going to drink, but I'll buy a big bottle of wine. And I shared it with friends. And it's funny because I told Hubie's mom that story and she loved it. She loved it. And, it's easy. You can get away from that. You can get away from that if you let it. And it's all about the food you feed your mind. And just kind of reminding and telling that story, it's rejuvenated me right now. I'd kind of forgotten about it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, we all need to have that subtle reminder, like, go do something fun. We want to enjoy life. Celebrate your victories. There's going to be plenty of defeats. Believe me, there's so many hard times, but when you have a good time, make sure that you do something fun. Treat yourself.
Yeah, because there certainly are hard times with athletics. You're enjoying it, you're loving it, but then it's sad when you get injured or when you're not doing as well as you would like, and you've got to deal with that. So it almost to your story, it almost shows how important it is to really be intentional with who you surround yourself with. Who is your team? Who's your coach? Who's your training partner? Who is your support group that's gonna motivate you to have fun and just lighten the mood and help you stay positive in tough times. So, do you ever take that into account if you're building a team or if you're training athletes at the same time? Do you take any like thought into that as a coach?
Well, it's really important that you get the team right. Like I said, your team members are in charge of the lanes, and everybody needs to be on the same page that they're there for the athlete's success. It's not our success. We're there to help the athlete be successful. And so in tennis, the tennis player generally will pick the team because he or she is subsidizing and paying for
Yeah.
the team members. So it's up to the athlete to get it right, and it's important. And with well, if you know much about the professional tour, but these players are playing more and more and more now. The calendar just keeps getting packed with more and more weeks, and there's more and more money involved. And so with that, the teams are getting bigger and bigger because there's more and more things to cover. Um, and so it's really important that everyone dovetails together and they work seamlessly and everyone stays in their lane and everyone knows their role and everyone works together. It's really getting more and more important as these players play more and more.
Yeah, and something you mentioned too, your story took place in COVID, and that was a tough time for sports too, kind of with more of the isolation. And we were in a time where we weren't able to have stands full, no fans. So now that things are back to normal, I mean, it's so fun to watch a sporting event and get into the fan side and see the energy of the crowd. Does that affect a player in their game and feeding off the
Oh,
energy?
absolutely. And it's funny because I can't remember. I think we were in Europe somewhere and there was no fans allowed. And the coaches had to, there's like literally six people, and that was three of the coaching staff from player A and three in player B. We all had to wear masks, and you'd walk through the Coliseum, you walk through the stadium, and you walk through, and you'd see pictures of finals or big matches years past, and the stands were packed. And I remember going, man, are we ever going to get back to that where you're sitting next to a stranger? It seemed so far away. And it was so quiet. The matches were so quiet. I could hear their other team, what they were saying, and they were miles away from our box. And it just was really sterile. And now you get back. I can remember once we started to come back and you could hear waves of the crowd being back. I mean, and everyone would get goosebumps because it was getting back to normal. And we're athletes. The athletes are out there. Yes, they're making a living, but they're performing. It's a service, and people pay money to watch that service. and they pay money because they want to get behind the player and they want to lend support. And the people are there because they want to be part of that person's success. And they're going to try to give them energy and give them all the positive vibes. And it really does help the players playing. It really does. Home field advantage in sports. And you see people, and I was fortunate enough to be with Hubie for a number of years, and the Polish people came out in droves for Hubie and Ego. They're such proud people, and they would have their flags, and they're all over the world, and they would just give their undenying, unrelentless support for Iga and Hubie. And they were so positive, and it didn't matter what happened on that last point. They were always there for them the next point. And it was really great for me to see it kind of on the outside, but also on the inside, being on the inside of the team, but kind of the outside. I'm not Polish, obviously, but embracing their native son. And you know, one of the tricks for Hubie, I always said, is like, listen, and for you players at home and for you coaches, when it was the worst of times for Hubie, I used to give him a signal. I would be like that. And that was pick out someone in the crowd, play for that person that's cheering for you. And then he would win a point. He'd go like this to the person, and they're freaking out because Hubie's including them in the match. And then it got crazy. And then his or her fans near them wanted to be part of it, and they got into it, and then before you know it, he has half the side of the stadium involved in, and he's pointing out people, and he's getting eyesight, and it lifted his spirits. So that's a trick, that if you're feeling awful, whatever it is, look out in the crowd. Someone paid money to come. Someone wants to be part of you. Someone is there to be entertained, or they like something about you. So if doesn't matter how you feel, play for that. Lock eyes with them. Give them something. Give them energy in return. And I promise you, it's gonna come back to you 10 to 100 fold. And it just might be the difference from you getting the W or you're not.
Wow,
that was fun to see. It was a lot of fun to be a part of it.
That is a fun story. That isn't something I would have imagined that would happen in a match, but energy is contagious, whether it's
absolutely,
whether it's your coach or even the fans. And I mean, it almost sounds like a popularity contest.
Make it one. Make it one,
Yeah, that sounds so fun though. So I guess in addition to kind of shaping the energy and helping out the athletes during a match, fans do play a big role because they are part of that equation for the energy, whether it's positive or negative. Do fans play a role as well in the community and just growth of the sport in general? I mean, I would think that they would have some, just to the point that, well, without fans, it's not as much fun to play. But I guess from your perspective, what role do fans play in just the growth and community aspect of tennis?
Well, if there's no fans, I don't think there's a tour. So that's pretty big. And I would say that a large majority, like it seems like over 90% of the fans actually play themselves.
Yeah.
And so that just leads to it. And that's why it's so important to grow the game of tennis, not only from the top side, but from the bottom level up too, because it's just a great sport to play for a lifetime, even if you don't go to a match. But if you get a chance, if you've never been to a professional tennis match, spend the money and get tickets like courtside. You cannot believe how ridiculous these athletes are. I mean, so you can really see it ground level, how much they get in and out of corners, how fast they are, how violent they hit the ball, how much rotation, how much speed. I mean, it's jaw dropping. It really is something that can change your perspective, because TV, it can't do it justice. I mean, it's TV, but when you're in the sound, that's another thing, to hear the sound, the ball come off It sounds like a cannon going off. And the serves, how fast and how quickly these guys and gals are able to neutralize. I mean, spend the money, do it, and I promise you won't be disappointed.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that does make me want to see it up close because I'm sure it is just a world of difference to experience it in person.
Hmm.
And so we've heard a lot of fun stories, and I'm curious to maybe see a little bit more inside or behind the scenes, I should say, with you coaching at the highest level. Is there anything that a fan might not have guessed as to what it would be like to coach at the highest level? And I guess could you maybe share a story that or just something that a fan may not expect that a coach at the highest level would be experiencing in your role?
Well, one of the things that they might not expect is that in the guys' locker room, everyone is very cordial and very respectful. You would think that, okay, we're going out, we're trying to beat each other's brains out every week. But for the most part, they understand it's a job and they're very respectful. And there's a fraternity amongst the players and also amongst the coaches. The coaches, we understand how hard it is for the players, and we also know how difficult it is for us coaches. And so we are constantly leaning on each other, asking advice for matchups, giving tips. And so, the days of where Johnny McEnroe would go out, he'd hate everybody to get an edge. It's just really not like that. Yes, everybody wants to win, but they don't want not at a cost. They want to win, and they want to. It's more important that they live their life a certain way, and they realize and understand that yes, it's a job, yes, it's a career, and yes, I want to win. But I'm really grateful, and I'm really awestruck when I see all these unbelievable athletes, but they act as very, very good human beings. And so if a fan were just to kind of go through the locker room, it's a very social place, and guys are getting along, and you're like, well, wait a minute, didn't you just like last week and like this? And it's like we all get it, we all get it. So from that standpoint, I don't know if people would think that it's like that. Don't get me wrong, we all want to win,
Yeah.
but if I'm coaching against a good friend of mine, it's like, hey, dude, I want my guy to beat your guy, but afterwards, like, it'll be okay. We're going out to dinner tonight. You appetizers are on you if you win, type of thing. And so I think that just adds for longevity because it's the best practices in you know if I'm on my deathbed, it's not going to be how many matches I won. It's going to be how influential I was to people in their life. They're not going to remember the wins and losses, but they're going to remember how I treated them or how I helped them or how they helped me. And that's a bond that's more important than any W or any check at the end of the month. Granted, I want to win. I do want a big check, but I want to do it a certain way. And for the most part, the locker room is like that.
That's a great perspective. And obviously fans are not going to know what it's like in a locker room. So thanks for sharing that perspective. And it does make sense. The media loves to portray rivalries and people love to kind of be entertained by that. And sure, when you face someone that you're playing, of course that, there's a little bit of tension there, you want to win, but ultimately these people have played each other for years and they've probably become friends just crossing paths and it's they can also share in their same struggles through sport and everything that they've experienced together. And so that's also the beautiful thing about sport, I think, is it brings people together, but at the end of the day, you want to win, but it's about playing and it's about having fun and being your best on that day. And as long as you give your best, there's nothing you can regret. But if someone beat you on the day and you gave your best and everything you could, then that person just got you that day, and then you get to come back and maybe beat them next time.
Well,
Um,
it gives you an opportunity to get to the practice court.
yeah,
So losing is an opportunity to figure out, okay, again, asset bucket, liability bucket. So it's always moving. You're always moving and never standing still.
right.
You're always presented with information as
Yeah.
to what the next task is.
Right. Failure is the feedback on where did I mess up? What can I improve on? And you can get very emotional about the losses, and you're allowed to, but you also have to look at those assets and liabilities. What did I do well? Okay.
Hmm.
What did I do poorly? What can I do better next time? And so I think
Absolutely.
that's where the more that you play, the better you get at that. And then maybe you shortcut that process, and so you can get to that progress a little bit quicker because you've just handled it time after time. Um, so let's end on one more question. You've shared a lot with us today and given us some great insights. Is there anything that you didn't share that is maybe a big lesson that you have learned, or like one or two lessons that you've learned through coaching some of the best athletes in the world, whether you've learned it on the coaching side and how to get these athletes to the next level, or maybe it's something you've learned from watching someone else's struggle and coming out on the other side of success.
Well, I there's a saying that I don't have the monopolies on ideas. What I have learned, and it's probably as I get older, I think probably it's going to happen to most people, is I don't take myself that seriously. I take what I do very seriously, and I try to be of service to others, and I also want to hear from others. If you are a new coach and you've got a great idea, I want to hear about it because I can remember when I was a young coach and I felt like maybe I had an idea and someone that was been in the position that I'm in, and if they took the time to say, "Hey, wait a minute, I want to hear what CV has to say," and they might not agree with it, but just given the time that they would stop, I think that's kind of what I was very fortunate in the people that helped me. And I've just learned to be of service. If I can be of service, um, that to me is what makes me feel good. And I hope that if I'm of service to someone, then they can turn around and be of service to someone. And if we can get in a situation where we have a lot of people doing that, then everybody wins. And so it's not about me; it's about we. And I love to be around people like that. I really do. That's like I said, life can be hard enough, but when you're with people that are of service and really care and care about you and you care about them and you can bounce ideas off and there's a trust factor. Four good eyes are better on a situation than two, and so on and so forth. So I think I've learned that that's the best practice for me because ultimately what I'm trying to do is help my player. And if another set of eyes that I trust sees something that I don't, I mean, who wins? The player.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of maybe what I've learned as I progress through this crazy thing called life.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great lesson, and it really hits on a lot of the same themes that you've mentioned here too. It kind of goes back to that energy, and when you're giving off positive energy and you're looking to serve others, you're more likely to get that in return. And I think that does take some maturity to come to that realization. I think that, you can think, oh, I don't want them to steal my trade secrets, or, oh, I want to be the one to fix the problem. But yeah, I think when you really lean on your community and you build that community, you start to see the benefits, and then you can go even further with more help and more people behind you.
Hmm. I agree totally.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. It's been great to have you back on here, Craig. Thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing some more awesome insights. You've been wonderful, and just thanks for sharing your experience with us.
Absolutely my pleasure. And thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Might have to get you back
Anytime,
on. Careful now.
anytime, anytime.
So, all
This
right.
is fun
Well,
for me.
yeah. Well, thanks, Craig. We'll see you next time.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review so others can find us more easily. It really helps us get the word out and it means a lot to us.
We are always looking for new stories to share here on our show. So if you know someone that would be a great guest, tell us their story by nominating them on our website at sportfuelslife.com. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
listening.